Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. Psalms 46:10. Now this one's on retreat center walls, whispered in yoga studios, printed beneath photographs of still lakes. The verse Christians reach for when the world is too loud, as if God were saying, quiet down and you will find me in the stillness. Virtually everything that reading assumes is wrong. Be still isn't an invitation, it's a command to the nations. The Hebrew word raphah, desist, drop your weapons, is addressed not to an anxious individual, but to the raging powers of the earth the psalm has been describing for 9 verses. It's the stillness of defeat, not the stillness of meditation. Know that I am God is not a call to inner awareness. It's the announcement of a recognition event. Yada, produced not by contemplative quiet, but by specific, historical, publicly visible acts of God that the nations cannot deny. The knowing is compelled from without, not generated from within. And the question, no reading I am aware of thinks to ask is this: how? How will God be exalted among the nations? By what act? Through what specific historical demonstration will the heathen be brought to know that He is God? The psalm has an answer. It's not what the wall art says. Now our nomenclature. The Hebrew word raphah, be still. Raphah means to let go, cease striving, drop resistance. But who is commanded to release? And what is determined entirely by the context. The context of Psalms 46:10 is not private prayer. It's the conclusion describing cosmic upheaval, nations in uproar, kingdoms tottering, wars brought to an end at the edges of the earth. Verse 9 gives the immediate ground. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Then verse 10, be still. The stillness commanded is the consequence of those acts. The nations are told to desist because God has just demonstrated their striving is futile. This is the stillness that falls on a battlefield when the victor stands and the defeated have no more to say, not the stillness of the contemplative cell. Now the Hebrew word yada, or know. Yada is knowledge as recognition. The specific recognition event produced by encounter with a demonstrable reality. In Isaiah 41:23, it is the criterion. Tell us what is to come hereafter, that we may know that you are God's. The knowledge of God is produced by the demonstration of God, the correspondence between what He declared and what came to pass. Not experience from within, recognition compelled from without. In Psalms 46:10, the yada is produced by the acts surrounding it, the breaking of weapons, the desolating works of the Lord. The nations will know because they have encountered an act no human power produced and no natural process explains. Now the next word, Elohim, I am God. Know that I am God, the greatest self-identification formula of the Exodus. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, in which the divine identity is always grounded in a specific act, not a philosophical assertion. Recognize from what I have done that I am the one I have always claimed to be. The identity is demonstrated, not assented. Now the word rum, I will be exalted. Rum appears twice in the imperfect. I will be exalted. This is not a description of present sovereignty. It's a prophetic declaration of a coming demonstration, a future exaltation of God in the earth, visible among the nations, recognizable as His act. The verse is asking a question, it is also answering. And that question takes us from the Psalm to Isaiah 46, to the Messianic fulfillment. 3 concentric circles of the same argument. Now, 4 interpretations. The contemplating reading is the first. Be still as spiritual practice. Now, the contemplative reading treats be still as an invitation to inner quiet. The cultivation of spiritual stillness as the primary mode of encounter with God. It has ancient roots. The desert fathers, the medieval mystics, the contemporary centering prayer movement, the instinct that encounter with God requires attention and receptivity is not wrong, but it imports that instinct into a verse whose subject, address, and context are entirely different. The silence of Psalms 46:10 is not the silence the contemplative cultivates. It is the silence of nations before a God who has just broken their weapons. The contemplative reading has inverted the direction of the knowledge. The verse says the nations will know because of what God has done. The contemplative reading says you will know because of the stillness you have cultivated. One is theophany from without. The other is experience from within. They are not the same thing. Now next, the devotional reading. God will be exalted as personal victory. The devotional reading converts the exaltation of God among the nations into a promise for the individual. If you trust God in your circumstances, He will vindicate you. The nations become metaphors for personal enemies. God's exaltation among the heathen becomes God showing up in your workplace or family conflict. This reading correctly perceives that the psalm grounds confidence in a God who acts, but it privatizes a cosmic announcement to the scale of personal circumstances, and in doing so loses the question the cosmic announcement demands. By what specific act will God be publicly exalted in the earth in a form the nations will recognize? The devotional reading produces comfort. It does not produce the yada the verse promises. Now, next, the national political reading, God exalted through Christian civilization. The national reading takes the exaltation of God among the nations as a mandate for the political triumph of Christian civilization, the Constantinian settlement, the Crusades, the colonial enterprise, the contemporary movement. Christian nationalism. It has the right scope. The exaltation is indeed public, geopolitical, addressed to nations, but it substitutes a human project for the divine act. The text does not say, my people will exalt me among the nations. It says, I will be exalted. The exaltation is the divine act, not the human project. And the manner of the exaltation, declared in advance, arriving in a form no human political project produced, is not the triumph of Christian civilization. It is the humiliation of the one whom the civilizations rejected. And lastly, the therapeutic readings, stillness as anxiety management. The therapeutic reading is the furthest from the text and the most culturally pervasive. It treats Psalms 46:10 as a prescription for anxiety management. Because God is in control, you can be still. Your anxious striving is unnecessary. Release your grip on outcomes. Every Christian mental health research reaches for it. And a practice of stillness before God does produce genuine benefit. But the therapeutic reading has completed total inversion. The nations are gone. The earth is gone. The historical demonstration is gone. The prophetic declaration is gone. Subject change, God to you. Object change, the nations to your anxiety. Mechanism change, divine historical act to human psychological practice. Outcome change, recognition of God by the nations to reduction of your stress. Not one element of the original has survived in the translation. The verse announces the coming exaltation of God among the nations through his acts in history. The therapeutic reading announces the coming peace of the individual through their practice of inner stillness. Now, the prophetic structure, 3 concentric circles. All 4 readings share the same error. They replace the specific historical act by which God will be exalted with something the human system produces from within. Inner stillness, personal vindication, political triumph, psychological peace. None of them asks, by what specific act will God be publicly, historically, recognizably exalted in a form the nations will know? Circle 1. The internal structure of Psalms 46. The psalm itself gives the first answer. It's not primarily a psalm of personal trust, though it grounds personal trust. It is a psalm of cosmic confidence in the God who acts at the geopolitical and cosmic level. Nations rage, kingdoms totter. He speaks and the earth melts. He breaks the bow, shatters the spear, burns the chariots with fire. Then verse 10, be still and know that I am God. The structure is the answer. God will be exalted by specific, publicly visible, historically real acts the nations witness and cannot explain by natural or human causes. The raphah is the nation's response to those acts. The yada is the recognition that follows from the demonstration, not the experience that precedes it. Circle 2, the canonical pairing with Isaiah 46. The second circle is Isaiah 46, the great prophetic twin. Against the collapse of the Babylonian gods, the God of Israel speaks. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. Isaiah 46, 9 through 10. I am God, and there is no other, the exact claim of Psalm 46:10. But Isaiah 46 specifies what makes the declaration true. The ability to declare the end from the beginning, to announce from ancient times things not yet done, to make a counsel that stands. This is the canonical answer to how God will be exalted, by the demonstrated correspondence between prophetic declaration and historical fulfillment, in a form no idol, no human system, no natural process can produce. Now, circle 3, the Messianic fulfillment. The third circle is the specific historical content. Isaiah 53 declared the servant's death 7 centuries before the crucifixion. Psalm 22 declared the specific manner: hands and feet pierced, garments divided, lots cast, surrounded by mockers, 1,000 years before it. Zechariah 12:10 declared the piercing. Daniel 9:26 placed the cutting off of the Anointed One at a calculable point in the timeline of history. And then it happened. Not as the disciples expected, not as any human arrangement produced, in every specific feature the declaration had specified. in the sight of witnesses who did not expect the correspondence. That is how God is exalted in the earth. Not by contemplative stillness, not by political triumph, not by therapeutic transformation, but the publicly examinable, historically verifiable, supernaturally announced correspondence between what was declared and what occurred in the person of the one who came in the Father's name, esteemed nothing by the world, whose death and vindication constitute the supreme act by which the God of Israel demonstrates himself among the nations. The nations are commanded to be still because the weapons of their opposition have been broken. Not by the military superiority of Christian civilization, but by the act the psalm anticipates and Isaiah declares, the demonstration that there is a God who speaks before the event and is vindicated by it. Now the conclusion, the stillness that follows demonstration. Be still and know that I am God. Listen carefully. The stillness is not the entry condition for knowing. It's the consequence. All four readings made the same error. They converted the consequence into the method. They said, be still, and then you will know. The text says, know from what God has done. And you have no choice but to be still. The three circles give the answer in increasing specificity. The psalm, God is exalted by acts that break the weapons of nations at the cosmic level. Isaiah 46, by the demonstrated correspondence between prophetic declaration and occurrence that no idol can produce. The Messianic fulfillment, by the death and vindication of the one declared from ancient times, in every feature specified, in a form no human arrangement engineered. And the personal stillness, the contemplative tradition values, inner quiet, the release of anxiety, the peace that passes understanding is real. But it is the fruit, not the root. It flows from encounter with the prophetically demonstrated God, not from the cultivation of silence. That peace does not come from stillness. It produces stillness. The stillness of the one who has stood in the third circle and recognized from what has been publicly declared and historically confirmed that the God who speaks before the event is the God who can be trusted through every event. The psalm's own verb, rum, I will be exalted, has a precise prophetic twin, Isaiah 33:10. Now I will arise, says the Lord. Now I will lift myself up. Now I will be exalted. The Hebrew aromam and anesh are from the same root cluster as rum. The same divine self-exaltation, the same arising after the nations have been brought low. And Jesus stands in that exact tradition. John 12:32. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. The Greek hypsu is the standard Septuagint reading of nasa and rum. Jesus is not merely describing crucifixion. He is consciously inhabiting the language of Isaiah 33:10 and Psalm 46:10. The divine self-exaltation, the lifting up of God in the earth, the moment when the nations are drawn to recognize Him. The cross is that lifting up. The rum of Psalm 46:10, the aromam of Isaiah 33:10, the hypsu of John 12:32, one act, declared from three angles, fulfilled in one event. Not the still small voice of the contemplative, the lifted up God of the nations. Be still. not because you have quieted yourself enough to feel him, because he has spoken, because he has acted, because what he declared from ancient times came to pass in the sight of witnesses, because the weapons of opposition have been broken by an act no human hand arranged, because the God who is exalted in the earth has already shown you how he is exalted. That is Psalm 46:10. Not a contemplative practice, not a personal promise,